My name is Blair Smith, and I'm a Senior Director with the Center for Financial Markets at the Milken Institute, and welcome to our ongoing series on Inclusive Capitalism. We're privileged today to have the founder and CEO of Vista Equity Partners, Robert F. Smith, to join us in our ongoing dialogue on how we can advance the conversation. Our Inclusive Capitalism program is built on two pillars: the sourcing of more diverse talent into the asset management industry and the allocation and governance to diverse founders. And we cover this dialogue from the analyst seat, or rather now the undergraduate seat, all the way up to the boardroom. So Robert, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We understand that your time is precious, so we appreciate the privilege of you taking the time to join us.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Blair. I'm so excited about the important work you're doing at the Milken Institute to not only raise awareness, but actually, get more capital into the hands of diverse asset managers. So excited to be here and excited to do my part.
Robert, you are considered one of the premier thought leaders in this space around the launching of a diverse-led firm, your outsized success, and leading the conversation around the allocation and governance to folks who look and sound like you and me. Talk to me a little bit about the beginning of that journey, because a lot of the folks who will be listening to this, there's still some who haven't heard the full story of your beginnings and your transition to asset management.
Sure, and I know we just have a limited amount of time, so I'll try to get to that quickly. My life began in Denver, Colorado. I grew up in a community, and I tell people it was a beloved community, one where it was segregated. It was one where we were really focused on, I'll call it, achieving a lot of the promise of America in our own community, and it taught me in the way that we interacted and engaged with each other the importance of working together. Look, not all things were perfect, but you did see a care of the children by the adults in the community, and folks focused on trying to bring additional resources into the community, some of which were provided by financial or governments, et cetera, and some of which were really just the will and knowledge of people in that community. And my parents were leaders in that context. And in the dawning of I'll call it an age where we now are starting getting access to information outside our community and media, et cetera, we started to realize that there was great opportunity that could be accomplished and achieved, first through education, second through, of course, through hard work and diligence. And desegregation was actually providing more access to that opportunities. But one of the things I did notice is, growing up, I grew up in a community where we had, small kind of restaurants and small businesses, but we actually did not have a large grocery store. We did not have a bank in my neighborhood. And my parents had to actually go across town, in essence, to go to places where you could actually buy, call it, high quality food at lower prices. And also gain access to the banking infrastructure. And so, when I look at even today, even that same community still has some of the challenges. And when we entered that period of hyperinflation in the 70s, something similar to what I think we're experiencing now, I just noticed the dramatic effect that it had on these small businesses that, closed and never came back. Some of those small shopping centers are still vacant. My parents and the community I was in, really was focused on ensuring that we all had access to education. I had a chance to go off to school, went to Cornell, got a degree in chemical engineering, worked in that area in applied research development, was exposed in that period of time through media, Black Enterprise Magazine in particular, to folks like, Reg Lewis, Ray McGuire, John Newton Daw, Stan O'Neill, and that actually, enticed me to think about this world of capital, whereas I was in, call it, the world of labor, working as an engineer. And that's what really inspired me to now start to think and explore and ask questions about, how does this capitalistic society work, and how does it create so many benefits to so many people on the planet, and why do we as an African American community not really participate in it fully? And that's what launched me, and of course, the investment banking, ultimately starting Vista, where I can actually, start to really deploy capital into businesses that create massive return for their customers, and then we as an institution have the ability to return the value creation we deliver to our stakeholders, which obviously include our investors and the members of the Vista community, and then drive a lot of that back into the communities that we all care about, which includes the HBCUs and students, and in my case, people of color, to participate more fully in this capitalistic society, leveraging technology, leveraging infrastructure, and leveraging capital. So, short, I tried to summarize it, but in essence, that's kind of how I got here and why this is important to lead some of these initiatives the way I do.
And Robert, you have been a leader. You are, or rather, Vista is a part of our Inclusive Capitalism Executive Council that we formed, both asset managers and asset holders, to try to put a pin in this problem where only 1.4% of the asset management industry, of an 87 trillion asset management industry, is represented, again, by women or Black, Indigenous, people of color. You've shown an amazing track record along with others, and yet there's still this continued pushback. There's pushback on the research. We have a preponderance of studies from Fundfire to McKinsey to the Knife Foundation. I've said in some of my convenings there was less research to put Neil Armstrong on the moon than there has been around diverse-led managers. But from your vantage point, the conversation is expanding beyond the LPs here in the U.S., and it's now becoming a more global DEI conversation. You travel all over the world. You speak with asset managers and asset holders across the globe. Help us to understand, why is this conversation now expanding and becoming more of a global DEI focus, and what does that look like and sound like?
Sure, and there's a couple elements here. You hit it right. The people of color are, if you put women into the group categorically, then we still make up less than call it 1.5, 1.4% of the total amount of assets under management, and clearly the representation in the communities where those assets come from is far different than those numbers. We have at different organizations like the NAIC, National Association of Investment Companies, led by Bob Green. Again, is a great resource to really identify these managers and and best practices and wherewithal. And I know they just completed yet again another study, 20 years, showing the quality and then quantifying the performance of these diverse managers, which clearly demonstrates on every performance indicator superior returns, lower loss ratios, et cetera, relative to the overall industry. So it should be a no-brainer to do it. But again, you see there continues to be reluctance for people to, quote unquote, invest outside of their group of people that they know or their tribe or that look like them, et cetera. But I think one of the interesting global dynamics beyond the body of research is people are understanding that the motion of people around this country, around the world, is actually more fluid. And if you want to stabilize that dynamic, you have to create opportunities in those communities in which those folks are living. And so you're seeing with the advent of technology and enablement in that context, an importance to build sustainable infrastructure in not only communities and communities of color, but communities around the world. And that's where I see a lot of the sovereign, I'll call it the sovereign asset managers and wealth managers are now really thinking about it. How do I stabilize my region? Well, I've got to stabilize, various countries in the region, and the way to stabilize it is create opportunity for people. Technology enables that to happen, and the more forward-thinking, thoughtful of those leaders that we engage with are leaning in heavily. They understand it's not just called the stabilization of the the community, but it also gives them higher return dynamics, because remember, those communities are offering consuming the goods, the services, the products that these investors are investing in. And if you improve their quality and standard of living, then they become more efficient consumers, which actually creates more returns and more opportunity sets. So there's multiple benefits that come from this. And like I said, the more forward thinking are the ones who are leaning into this and actually will be the leaders from an economic return and from a social return in the communities, because they're putting their capital and they're investing in more diverse groups of investors, more diverse groups of citizens, to enable them to participate more fully in that case in capitalism. So those are some of the dynamics that I'm seeing, and the good news is with enterprise software, we have the ability to enable that and to enable that at scale, and I think long term that's going to benefit those who embrace it more inclusively.
Well, that's fantastic. I think we're both pleased to see some of these more archaic buckets around the DEI conversation get smashed and become more expansive and more inclusive. And certainly I look forward to seeing some of the work that Bob Green and NAIC have done. We'll make sure that we amplify their reports through our work here at Milken.
Yeah, and I think it's important, the Milken Center, you all have a very unique position in the marketplace that, obviously, to say, okay, how do you take this information and make people, truly understand credibility of the studies, but also, expand the capital base that's then now being drawn and driven into these diverse managers, because certain countries, they may not have the same level of diversity that we benefit from here in the U.S., and they may have some populations in those countries that are looking for that same sort of access may not be as large, but I think Milken Institute can really start to highlight how, on a performance perspective, how well these diverse managers have done, and that, bringing additional capital in from outside the U.S. or even inside the U.S. into these managers, I think will be a very unique role that the Milken Institute can play to expand the opportunity set really for all people on the planet, including those who are investing in these groups who come from outside the U.S. So I think you have a very unique position that you can actually use that position to expand this opportunity set for all of us.
Well, Robert, I appreciate that, and I know it's a conversation that our founder Michael Milken and I have had consistently about how to affect change in the space. I will be publishing 2 white papers. One, The Path to Inclusive Capitalism, which will come out later in the 4th quarter. And the second is 7 specific action steps for the industry to follow. And we'll use our executive council as a way to encourage the industry to follow those action steps through our convenings. But if you could suggest a specific action step that either we through the Milken Institute or that the industry itself could execute on, if it's a scorecard or if it's a policy, what do you think would probably be something that we could execute on that would affect real change?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. One of the most important things that you can do is to enable, capital to flow into these communities. In my mind, if I focus on, the communities of color in the United States, nearly half of Black households are either unbanked or underbanked. And that is it's a disablement dynamic. And so, thinking about and working with us, for instance, on enabling our CDFIs and MDIs, which are, really the capillary banking systems, and enable them to not only build out their digital capacity, but also infuse those systems with capital. I just remember when we were going through the PPP, distribution. If it was part of the early part of the pandemic crisis, one of my good friends, Bill Bynum, who runs Hope Credit Union, before the pandemic did 40 to 60, call it business loans in a typical year. And through the support of us and others, and in digitizing his capacity, he was able to approve 2,900 loans in a short period of time, kind of 3 months, and I think the average loan size was like $30,000, right? And that's an important element that creates a massive amount of economic impact that's real, that's tangible. But digitizing these banks, driving capital into these banks, and then helping these banks through these digital platforms reach students. And these students, these young folks are really how we want to focus on the next generation of opportunity. But they come to life through a digital platform. They don't come to life the way that we kind of go into the bank and walking in the bank. And I think it's an important part of what the Milken Institute can do. The second, of course, is to help hold accountable some of the institutions that have made pledges as a result of after the murder of George Floyd. I think there's over $100 billion was pledged. Majority of that was with 50 institutions, 50 companies. And just ensuring that capital actually goes to very effective ways to drive that. We formed a group, we call it the Southern Communities Initiative. It's Vista, it's PayPal, it's BCG, and have built now several allies. Some of which, like the King Center in Atlanta, the Urban League of Louisiana, that have now we built kind of, I'll call them execution-ready projects to really drive economic access and inequality across those communities. And in those, call it 7 communities, through our SDI, 100-mile radius around them gets to 50% of the Black population in America. So we look at those as being important infrastructural things that we've done that now just need organizations and partners to help drive capital into those communities. So those are just a couple ideas that I would hope the Milken Institute would help us drive forward.
Well, absolutely. As you know, my predecessor, Ann Betry, he was a part of those convenings that led to ultimately capital being distributed to those MDIs and Black-owned banks. So I pledged to continue those efforts, and the 14 strategies that he developed, I'm tasked with executing those. So looking forward to the follow-up with those organizations that you referenced, and it sounds like maybe a scorecard might be applicable both on that side of the conversation and on the asset management side of the conversation as well. You mentioned students, and in the time that we have, I wanted to take a moment to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, HBCUs. I'm a proud HBCU alum, and I'm proud of the fact that we've been given the go-ahead at Milken to launch our own HBCU strategic initiative, which includes a fellows program, which will create a pathway for students at some of the top HBCUs in the country to gain access to some of the white glove, top tier asset management firms, some of which are part of our executive council. We recently had the HBCU Week, part of the White House HBCU initiative, and you made some extraordinary comments, very memorable comments about not just the value of HBCUs, but what's needed in order for them to continue to thrive. And I was wondering if you would take a moment to talk about that.
Sure. Again, we've got some challenges in our country around, how we're going to meet some of the labor shortages, and the immigration dynamic is looks like there's no real tenable solution on the horizon, and we've got political discord that is keeping that from happening. And we have to really enable every citizen in this country to have an opportunity to participate fully in this new digital economy. And I look at it. I think it's 80% of the HBCUs are still in broadband deserts. I think we formed the Student Freedom Initiative, which has two parts. The first was really focusing on freeing students from the debt burdens and their parents from the debt burdens who are graduating from HBCUs. So we created an income contingent alternative to Parent Plus loans, and it's being very well accepted. But then we realized that there's a digital infrastructure problem in HBCUs, and so we partnered in that case with Cisco and ABC Technologies, and are now building that digital infrastructure in these HBCUs. So they now, of course, have the cyber support, so they can remain eligible for Title IV funding, which is about $1 billion a year, but then also create broadband access. These students have to turn into regional innovation hubs ultimately, because they are the centers of their communities, and those communities have, small, medium, black businesses around them that don't have broadband access, which means they're not participating in the overall global economy and even the U.S. economy. So it's important for us to focus on that and do that well. And so that's part of what we're doing with our Student Freedom Initiative, and want to continue that effort until we have all the HBCUs completed.
Well, that's fantastic, Robert. And, we appreciate some of the coaching and guidance that we've received from some of your team, Keith Schultz and others, around the development of our own HBCU strategic initiative. And we look forward to continuing that. And then also, as you probably know, as a part of the privilege of the HBCU experience is the opportunity to wear gregarious, collegiate, and fraternal paraphernalia. So I think that you may have a gift coming your way. When I see you next year at the HBCU football challenge, we'll have to make sure that you're appropriately attired for the event. But thank you so much. With that, again, I want to thank you for the time to amplify the message of inclusive capitalism through our medium here. I'm Blair Smith with the Milken Institute. Thank you, Robert F. Smith, CEO of Vista Equity Partners, for your wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for your efforts and all that you're doing. All the best.